Sorry, I was just in the can. Do you know what that means? In the can? Well, the can is a slang term for bathroom. Did you know that? So if you use the can, that means you use the bathroom. Wow, you learned something new in 5 seconds already. Now, I want to ask you a question. What is slang? What is slang? Do you know? Well, I'm going to tell you. But first, you need to subscribe to my channel right down there and click on the bell. Okay, so slang just means very informal language. Very informal language. You know, sometimes when people text each other, they use a very informal kind of language, and we could call that slang. Okay, that would be a good example of slang. Let's take a look at another example here. Okay, let's say you see your grandpa. You could say, "Hi, Grandpa," or "Hey, Grandpa," right? That would be normal talking, right? Now, let's say your grandpa goes to a fancy restaurant and someone opens the door for your grandpa and says, "Good evening, sir." Good evening, sir. That would be an example of very formal speech, right? Most of the time we don't talk like this, but, you know, in formal situations, right, they might say this. Or you might see your grandpa and say, "Sup, Gramps? Sup, Gramps?" Can you hear that loud airplane flying over my house? I need to live in a quiet place. I hate when the airplanes fly over. It distracts me so much. Okay, so sup is short for what's up. Sup, Grandpa? Okay, that would be slang. Okay, I would think that's probably slang, right? Most people would probably just use normal English. But, you know, let's take a look at language here. Language is always like a spectrum of a lot of different ways you can talk, right? You have formal language, and then you have very informal language over there, which we call slang. And then everything sort of in the middle is normal, right? Now, normal is informal. Right? When we talk English in a normal setting, we use informal language. Right? We don't use formal speech very often in English. Actually, we often use informal speech in very formal situations too. Right? So just because a situation is formal doesn't mean you have to use formal language. Very often we use informal language. For example, I was recently watching a very important meeting in the Canadian government. The Canadian government. I was watching it on my computer. Okay, and this guy was the leader of the meeting. And he said, "Do you guys want to take a bathroom break? Do you guys want to take a bathroom break?" Okay, look at the word guys. Do you think that's slang? That's pretty informal, right? For a government meeting, right? He was talking to men and women, right? So you might think, wow, this is a formal situation. He's going to say, "Would you, men and women, or would you, ladies and gentlemen, like to take a bathroom break?" But he didn't say that. He said, "Do you guys want to take a bathroom break?" Okay, so even in the most formal situations, we often use very informal kind of language. Okay, so some people would think the word guys is slang. Some people, but most people nowadays would probably say the word guys is just normal talking, right? And that means men and women, right? For example, you could use that when you're talking to your grandparents. You could say, "Hey, Grandma and Grandpa, do you guys want to go for coffee? Hey, do you guys want to go for coffee? Or you could use it when you're talking to kids, like a group of kids. Hey, do you guys want ice cream? Right? Even if all the kids are girls, let's say, you could still use guys. Hey, do you guys want ice cream? Guys nowadays is just a very normal way of talking. Hey guys, right? It means like two or more people. It doesn't matter if they're men, women, children, old people, whatever. You can use the word guys, okay? So it's sort of relative. What is slang? Well, it's up to you. You can decide what is slang and what's not. Okay, someone might think one word is slang, and then you could ask another native English speaker, and they would say, no, I don't think that's slang. That's normal, right? Like, look at this word, sup. Sup. Okay, it's short for what's up. Do you think that's slang, or is that normal? Well, probably most people would say it's definitely not formal, right? Well, some people would just use it in their normal way of talking. Sup. For me, it's probably more slang. I don't say this. I might say it to, some friends in a very casual setting, but most of the time I would just say hi or how's it going? Okay, that would be more normal. So I think this might be slang, but that's my opinion, right? So it's relative. Relative means it's not fixed. There's no fixed answer. Okay, so I want to ask you a very important question. How do you know if a word is slang, normal, or formal? Like, if you're learning English, you want to know this, right? How do I know if a word is slang, or if it's normal, or if I should use it in a formal situation? Well, I want to tell you that's very hard, and it comes down to the feeling. You need to feel the word, okay? So learning a language is very hard because you need to learn the meaning of a word and the feeling of a word. Wow. You need to learn the meaning of a word and the feeling of a word. That's so important. You can't just learn the meaning of a word. You need to learn the feeling as well. For example, the word bathroom and the can, they mean the same thing, right? They have exactly the same meaning, but they have a different feeling. They have a different feeling, okay? If I'm talking to my grandma, right, I might say, I need to use the can. Hey, Grandma, I need to use the can. Right? I could say that. But I wouldn't say that to your grandma. I wouldn't say it to your grandma. Why not? Well, because it would feel strange. It would feel too informal to say that to your grandma. But I could say that to my grandma. Okay, so that's an example of how words have a certain feeling, even though they might mean the same thing, right? So every word in English has a feeling. It has a feeling. And you need to learn the feeling as well, right? I mean, maybe you're talking to, like, let's say your grandma and your grandpa. When you're talking to your grandma, you might use more informal kinds of talking. And maybe when you're talking to your grandpa, you use more formal kind of talking. Why? Right? You just make the subconscious decision in your mind. You don't think about it. Right? We don't think about these things. Like if I see your grandma, I wouldn't think, Mark, don't say the can. You should say the bathroom. Right? So I need to use the bathroom. Could I use the bathroom, please? I wouldn't say, can I use the can, please, if I was at your grandma's house. But I don't think about it. I make that decision subconsciously, right? So like I said, every relationship or every situation, our mind is making decisions on what kind of language we're going to use. Maybe you have a more casual relationship with your grandma, and maybe your relationship with your grandpa is, for some reason, more formal, right? Maybe that's just how you were raised. I don't know. So we do this all the time when we speak, right? We make these kinds of decisions, what we're going to say, which words are appropriate and maybe inappropriate to use in that situation. Here's another example, right? When you're talking to your friends, you might say crap or dump. Hey, I'm just going to use the can. I need to take a dump. I need to take a dump. All right. That means go poop. Right. But if you're talking to like your doctor or a scientist or some like formal situation, then you would not use crap or dump. You would use words maybe like defecate or bowel movement. Okay, if you're talking to your doctor, it would be really weird to tell your doctor about taking a crap or taking a dump. That's way too informal. Okay, you need to use this kind of language. So this is an example of how every situation needs a different kind of language, right? And it takes time to learn the feelings of words. It takes time to learn the feelings. And if you make a mistake, that's okay. That's part of learning. You make embarrassing mistakes. That's just part of life. Like if you are talking to my grandma and you say, I need to use the can. I need to use the can. That's okay. I mean, it's probably a mistake because it's too informal. You chose the wrong word. You should say, could I use your bathroom? Or I need to use the bathroom, right? And if you say the can, maybe if I'm your teacher, I'll tell you after the situation. I'll say, hey, in that situation, when you're talking to my grandma, it would probably be better not to use the word the can, right? Even though they mean the same thing, right? So you need to learn how to feel the language, and it's okay if you make mistakes. Now, I want to mention a mistake that I think some people make. Okay, now some people think slang means idioms and phrasal verbs or other kinds of language like this. That's slang. Actually, that's a mistake because they might think, well, I just want to learn English for my job. I don't need to learn slang English. I just want to learn normal English for my job. So I'm not going to learn idioms. I'm not going to learn phrasal verbs. Well, that's a big mistake because idioms and phrasal verbs are very common in every part of English. Informal English, normal English, slang English. Okay, so don't think that these are always just slang. They're not. They're very important. For example, let's say, sorry, I just had to clear my throat. Clear my throat. Sometimes if your throat gets a little bit clogged up, you have to clear it. You have to go like this. That's called clearing your throat. Okay, so let's say this guy is a CEO, right? He's talking to some people in his company. That's a very formal situation, right? So he says, we're on the fence about this decision. We're on the fence about this decision. Okay, on the fence is an idiom that means you haven't decided yet. You're not sure if this option is better or this option is better. You're on the fence. Okay, so that's an example of, how we would use an idiom in a very formal context, right? Idioms are very common in all kinds of English, like I said. Now, some idioms are more informal, right? Like, for example, this. You could say, my grandma is off her rocker. My grandma is off her rocker, right? That would be a more informal idiom. And that means that your grandma has sort of lost her mind a little bit. She's gone a little bit crazy. Sometimes when people get very old, they lose their ability to think clearly, right? So if you're talking to your friend, you could say, hey, my grandma is sort of off the rocker. She's off her rocker. That means she's not thinking very clearly. Or you could use that idiom if someone does drugs, for example, or drinks a lot of alcohol and their brain cells die. You could say, after my friend did drugs, he went off the rocker. He went off his rocker. You can say the rocker or his rocker or her rocker. Okay, that just means that your mind sort of isn't quite sharp. So if people have a very sharp brain, that means they think very clearly, they're smart. But if they sort of lose their mind, then you can use this idiom, off their rocker. So this would be an example of an idiom. You probably wouldn't use this idiom in a very formal setting, right? So every idiom, every word, every phrasal verb has a certain feeling to it, right? And like I said, you just need time to learn that feeling. Okay, so idioms are very important. Phrasal verbs are very important for the whole range of English. And slang just means any kind of writing or speaking that is very informal. But that's important too if you want to improve your English, right? It's good to expand your range of understanding and speaking in English, right? It's good to learn formal English. It's good to learn very informal English. If you only know this kind of English, you're really limiting yourself. It's like you are putting yourself in a box. You can't interact with a wide range of people and a wide range of different situations. If you can interact, if you can use your English in a wide range, that's great. That means your English is awesome. I would say you're fluent. You're an expert. Okay, so that's the goal, right? That's why you want to learn English, to get better. Well, at least I hope that's your goal. I hope your goal isn't just to learn one little piece of English. Okay, hey, if you're interested in learning about phrasal verbs and idioms, I have some books on my website that I have written. I'll put the link to my website right down there in the description if you're interested in improving your idioms and phrasal verbs. Okay, so let's do some homework. I want you to use some slang down there in the comments. Say something, try to use something in slang. I'm curious to know what you think is slang. Okay, so I want to hear what your idea of slang is. So write anything. You can just make something up in slang and write it down there in the comments. And I'll see you guys over in the next episode of Mad English TV. Take care.